the thing about libertarianism, the stumbling block that people have about it, is that you can construct a libertarian sounding argument for anything. If you want to go run around in the street and stab people, you can construct a libertarian sounding argument for the freedom to do whatever you want with your own knife. That's not libertarianism. But if you're glib enough, you can make it sound libertarian.
Joining us live this morning, the author of Theft of Fire. Good morning, Devin. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Always fascinated by your point of view on things. You wrote essentially a blog post responding to what Christian Hines had said, agreeing in some ways, disagreeing with others. Maybe you could just explain it in your own voice.
Well, Christian's a good guy and he's a smart guy, but he's wrong here because this is a popular trend in criticizing libertarian thinking right now. And what it is it boils down to a form of surrender from the left. And basically the criticism is, oh, libertarianism doesn't work because we have this society full of garbage people who can't be allowed to be free because we've had the borders open for however many years. Okay, so you're just going to give up on that. So you're just going to, oh, okay, you can open the border, you can fill the whole country with the sweepings of the third world, the people who the third world doesn't even want. And then, oh, we need to be authoritarian because those people can't handle freedom. Well, of course there are people who can't handle freedom. Of course, some people are better than others. Nobody likes to say that, but everyone knows that. And, the people who wrote the Constitution, the people who founded the country, they knew this. They said things like, our form of government is only suitable for a moral, well-ordered, civilized people. It can do no other, or however that quote goes exactly.
A moral and religious people, John Adams.
Yeah. Some of them reference religion, some of them don't. There's a bunch of quotes like that. But, the thing is that you cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. The quality of a society is never better than the quality of its people. So if you're saying, oh, we need to have authoritarianism because some people are dumb, well, you've given up. You've given up on the thing that made this nation great. You've given up on, okay, let's have a nation full of smart, upright, pro-social people, and let's get out of their way. That is the whole theory behind America. And we talk a lot about the political philosophy that led to America. But what we don't talk as much about is the fact that America was founded with a very high quality people. First of all, you had the British Empire. And the British Empire, were some of the best people on the planet in terms of competence and being pro-social. And you can speculate a lot about why that was so. And, they hanged the bottom 1% every generation, some people like to say. But, it was a very effective empire. It was full of people who had pro-social impulses. And then what you do is you take those people and you filter them further using the big blue wobbly thing between Britain and America. It's an ocean. It's hard to cross. It's dangerous to cross. There's a wilderness on the other side. So now you're filtering for people who can go there and survive and make a life for themselves. Well, they've got to be high IQ, they've got to be high agency, and they've got to get along with their neighbors. all of a sudden you have a very high quality people. And what you do when you have a high quality people is you get the hell out of their way and let them get on with it because they're already going to build cool stuff. So America is not just freedom, it's, hey, let's get some good people and then let's not micromanage them. So, now you have conservatives essentially who should want to conserve these two things. They're instead surrendering. They're saying, "Oh, we give up on having a good population. Let's just micromanage everybody because we can't do anything about about the massive immigration, about all these stupid or antisocial people who can't handle freedom, who use any liberty they have to mess up things for everyone around them." Well,
You say, I want you to continue to expand on that actually, if
yeah,
you don't mind.
sure.
Because this was in your post, I think it's important. You say libertarian arguments are being weaponized against Western civilization
Oh, yeah.
by crypto Marxists and degenerate hedonistic freaks.
Yeah.
Explain crypto Marxists and explain degenerate hedonistic freaks.
Well, have you ever noticed that there's a lot more libertarian think tanks than there are libertarian dollars to fund them?
Yes.
So what are these libertarian think tanks for? The Cato Institute, Reason Magazine. They're not run by libertarians. They're run by people with money who want something. And the thing about libertarianism, the stumbling block that people have about it, is that you can construct a libertarian sounding argument for anything.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to go run around in the street and stab people, you can construct a libertarian sounding argument for the freedom to do whatever you want with your own knife. That's not libertarianism. But if you're glib enough, you can make it sound libertarian. So there's an awful lot of people who want to get away with an awful lot of shit. And they like to make libertarian sounding arguments to attack the basic structures that any society, even a libertarian society, requires. If you look at the last candidate for the so-called Libertarian Party, what was his priority? What was his liberty? That he was all about? Well, butt sex. you know let's tell it like it is. This was the butt sex candidate. And it wasn't about liberty in any sense that the founders would have understood it. It was, I want to do what I want right now, and I have my pet issue that I want to be free on, and I don't care about anything else. And oh yes, I want open borders because apparently now we have libertarians who don't understand the concept of property. The basis of property is the ability to exclude others. The basis of property is investment. If you invest in something, you have to control it, or it's not yours and you won't invest in it in the first place. Well, our ancestors invested in America. And now we have crypto Marxists making fake libertarian arguments that, the government shouldn't prevent people from crossing a border. But what that boils down to is, the people who labored to make America great, because they wanted to leave it to their descendants, they have no property rights. They have no property rights in America because that's not their personal house. So their investment in the whole country doesn't matter. We just have to let anybody in.
Is it the case, though, Devin, that we do have, and I agree with you, crypto Marxists who very glibly use the language of libertarianism to advocate for what may be crypto Marxist things, or perhaps the degeneracy that you speak about. But isn't it also the case when you talk about the rise of these right wing authoritarians here that want to give up on society and say no, everybody needs to be ruled? Isn't it the case too that many of them glibly use the language of libertarianism to advocate for a race? You talk about gay race communists. What about the racial identitarian rightists?
Well, I don't think it's the racial identitarianism that is anti-libertarian. A lot of people are looking for racial solidarity because they've been targeted on the basis of race. So it's like, we hate you because you're white. We're going to make you second-class citizens because you're white. And they start saying, well, let's band together on the basis of being white to resist this. That's different from the anti-libertarian argument of we need to micromanage the entire country because we have all these people who don't act right. To me, it seems like we have all these people who don't act right. Well, there's your problem. There's your problem right there. That's the problem you need to deal with. The way I like to put it is you can run your society in one of two ways. You can either put people in prison who belong there, or you can run your entire society like a prison because it's full of people who belong in prison.
It makes sense.
When somebody can't handle living in a free society, then the solution is not to have an unfree society and spoil things for everyone. The solution is to kick them out.
I know which society I would prefer.
And I think the people who have given up on libertarianism and are making authoritarian arguments would agree with you. I think they want to live in that society too. They want to live in a free society too, but they've given up hope. They've given up hope of being able to have one. They've given up hope of being able to have nice things. And they're focused on let's just have order. Let's just have order because that's all I can conceive of hoping for. And I think that's a defeatist attitude.
Yeah, I completely agree. Boy, it's hard to find people out there who think like you, Devin. I guess everybody who's watching this show is going to need to read your books, which we are going to talk about here in just a few minutes. I love that you use science fiction to convey ideas. Very Robert Heinlein. I've been thinking about Starship Troopers a lot lately just because I ran into, when I was in LA, one of my favorite actors from that movie, the son of Gary Busey, Jake Busey, and it was an absolute blast. I didn't get to ask him the question I wanted to ask him, which is, do you think we'll ever see a faithful adaptation of that book? Nevertheless, maybe hopefully we'll get to see your book, the novelization of your ideas turned into a film. Maybe I'll produce it one day. We'll see if I can get the rights to Theft of Fire. We'll talk after the
show. Oh, I don't sell rights.
We're glad to have you here, and it looks like the chat is really rowdy and enjoying this conversation. Amy J.E.'s over in the chat, who's a big supporter of this show, and she's a big thinker, said, 2 things keep me from officially joining the Libertarian Party. She says the smugness. They seem to think they have cornered the market on principles, and they live in a theory world that doesn't always work in the world. I think you probably have a lot to say about those things, but specifically number 2. Devin, would you like to respond to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, for every philosophy, however noble, there is a retarded version of it endorsed and practiced by retards. And if you want to find libertarianism's retards, go to the Libertarian Party because they are thick on the ground there. Most of what I see as the Libertarian Party is just a band of people who have one particular issue that they have, which is their issue that they want to make libertarian arguments for. I want to have gay sex in public. I want to smoke pot. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want open borders. That's not what libertarianism means to me. What libertarianism means to me is I want a free society where human agency is maximized and people's destinies are maximally determined by their choices. And in order to get that, you have to be sophisticated about the chess moves you make politically. You can't just say, oh, if the government's doing it, it's bad. Or, oh, I want to make everyone free to do everything. And especially not, oh, I want to open the borders. Because that is libertarianism as suicide pact. The people who you are importing are not libertarians. And they will outvote you, and there will be no more libertarianism anymore. You will have a socialist dictatorship. So, you have to make moves according to your goals, not just according to some abstract principle. The way I like to put it is that a lot of these sort of naive libertarians, I call them, they say, "Oh, the ends don't justify the means." And my response to that would be, the means don't justify the ends. If you make every move according to some abstract principle, instead of looking at the world around you and thinking what the actual effects are going to be, then you are morally responsible for what the real outcome is. You can't just say, I made the moves according to the noblest principles. Well, you drove society into a ditch. So, to me, libertarianism is about, as intelligently as possible, working towards a society where people have the most agency, the most self-determination that can be sustained. Not about, oh, if the government does it, I want to stop it. That's my principle, and I don't have to think about it.
You've given me a lot to think about, Devin. It makes life harder when I think about shit. Life was a lot easier when I was a young baby libertarian and I didn't know shit about fuck, and I could just, just say everything the government does is bad.
Yeah, well, young people like to yell.
Yes.
Because they've figured out that the world isn't perfect.
Yes.
And that adults were lying to them as kids when they said everything was fine. But they haven't yet gotten old enough to figure out that it's not imperfect because the older people don't care. It's imperfect because shit's hard.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, absolutely. I wish more libertarians saw this, just because, I left the Libertarian Party in 2017 because even though I was still pretty young, like the party was still so infantile even for me. And I don't consider myself to be what you might call a mature person in general, just because I'm kind of a goofball, a prankster, a jokester, and things like that. But even the Libertarian Party was like, all right, I gotta be taken seriously in some level, in some aspect, in some respects, especially if you truly care about your principles, if you truly care about your ideals, you will take the necessary steps to implement them, which is why, even though I voted for Donald Trump, I still criticize the administration when I disagree with things like tariffs, or if I disagree with them on this new Palantir surveillance network that they might be creating, allegedly. And libertarians are like, you voted for this, you voted. I'm like, because this is the reality of adulthood, that there were two options. You could have voted for the libertarian candidate. I'm like, no, they were not. They did not make themselves legitimate candidates. There was no choice. There was no third. It may have been on the ballot, but it certainly was no choice. And those are the sad realities of adulthood. That sometimes
the means do not justify the ends.
Yeah, the means do not justify the ends. New Devin Erickson quote. I'll repost that quote when we post the video of this later, but we can't go without more people hearing about your great book, Theft of Fire, science fiction novel. Tell us more about it.
This is set in the near future of the solar system, and I take the opportunity to maybe play a little bit with the setting, talk about what forms of government or lack thereof you're going to see in the future. So this is actually a full anarcho-capitalist society, which is entirely run by civil law. But that's the background. You set a nice adventure story, and it is you don't give people a boring politics lecture. But I had some fun with that because I think fiction persuades not by telling people what to think, but by showing them things they never thought about before and letting them decide what to think about.
Yeah, that's why Ayn Rand was so successful and why people still say her name today. Devin Erickson is the author of Theft of Fire. You can find it on Amazon or any fine bookstores. Make sure that you check him out over on X. He's an amazing follow. I have him set his notification set to be turned on. When you go to X, he's not a cat, but he has a cat as his profile picture. And it's Devin_Erickson, and it's S-E-N because he is a Dane, just like me, Peterson, S-E-N. Devin, thank you so much. We appreciate all your contributions online, and we look forward to reading your book. He's the modern Robert Heinlein, everybody. Devin Erickson.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.